The war had lasted 40 years. Across the stars, the mighty Galactic Empire was falling. Its fleets, once invincible, were scattered and burning. The enemy, the Drax horde, swept through worlds like a storm, leaving silence and ash behind. In the Imperial Command Hall, the air was heavy with smoke and fear. Admiral Karen Voss, a tall reptilian with silver scales, stood before the holographic council. "Our losses are beyond recovery," she said. "We've lost 7 sectors this cycle. The Drax don't negotiate. They consume." The Emperor's voice was cold. "We need reinforcements." "Are there no allies left?" Karen hesitated. "There is one. A species outside the central grid. Isolated. Primitive," the council murmured. "Name them," the Emperor demanded. "Earth," she said. "Designation, human." Silence. Then laughter filled the chamber. "Humans?" One general sneered. "They're barely industrial. You'd call farmers to fight the Drax?" Karen met his gaze. "Farmers, maybe. But their war records are disturbing. They fought more internal conflicts than any other known species. Their entire history is blood and fire." The Emperor leaned forward. "Send the request." Weeks later, the humans arrived. A single black carrier ship emerged from hyperspace over the Imperial capital. Its hull was marked with strange symbols, a red skull, a pair of wings, and 2 words in harsh English letters: Helldivers Division. Karen stood on the landing platform as the ship descended. The engines roared, shaking the ground. The ramp lowered, and they came out, not in neat lines, not with honor guards. They came out laughing. The first human, a massive man with scars across his face, wore no helmet. He chewed something and spat it on the deck before speaking. "Which one of you begged for help?" Karen blinked. "I am Admiral Voss. You must be the commander." The human grinned. "Commander?" "Nah, just Sergeant. Name's Holt." He extended a hand, a strange gesture of greeting. When Karen didn't move, Holt shrugged and looked around. "Nice place. Smells like fear." Behind him, a dozen more humans stepped out. Some were joking. Some were singing. One was drinking from a metal flask. Their armor looked mismatched, patched, burned, customized. Not soldiers. Survivors. Karen frowned. "Where is your commanding officer?" Holt smirked. "You're looking at him. Everyone here's been in command at least once. We don't do ranks the way you do." The Admiral's scales rippled in discomfort. "The Empire expects discipline." Holt laughed. "Lady, you didn't call us for discipline. You called us because you're losing." The room went quiet. Karen's jaw tightened. "Your numbers are too small. We expected at least 1,000 troops." "Numbers don't matter," Holt said simply. "You said you needed war fighters. Well, these are the best you'll ever get. We don't just fight wars, we end them." She stared at him. "And what do you want in return?" Holt smiled faintly. "A one-way ticket home. When we're done." The briefing room later that day was chaos. Imperial officers shouted about strategy, supply lines, and fleet formations. The humans ignored them. They passed around coffee, told jokes, and argued about who got to fight first. Karen slammed her claw on the table. "You will follow orders." Holt leaned back in his chair. "Sure, as long as your orders make sense. If not, we improvise." "War is not improvisation," she hissed. He grinned. "That's why you're losing." Hours later, Holt stood alone on the observation deck staring at the stars. Karen joined him. "You think you can turn the tide?" He didn't answer for a long moment. Then he said quietly, "You think war's about rules. It's not. War's about who's willing to go further." He turned to her. His eyes were cold. "You wanted soldiers. What you got are lunatics. Every one of us has seen hell. Some of us liked it." Karen felt a chill crawl up her spine. Below them, the human carrier's hangar bays opened. Inside, machines stirred, drones, drop pods, and something new. The Empire had asked for help. Tomorrow, they would learn what kind of help Earth sent. The world of Cortus IV was already lost when the humans arrived. The planet's skies burned red with plasma storms, and the surface crawled with the Drax horde, an endless sea of scaled beasts, claws, and cannons. Every Imperial outpost had fallen. Only one remained. Fort Herrix, a crumbling fortress surrounded by miles of wasteland and death. Admiral Karen Voss stood in the command center, her tail coiling with nervous energy. "We've lost 90% of our garrison. Reinforcements can't reach us through the storms. The humans are on their way, but—" She stopped. The thought unfinished. Her officer, a young reptilian named Trell, looked up from his screen. "Admiral, their ships just dropped out of hyperspace. But there's only one." Karen's eyes narrowed. "One?" Before Trell could answer, the ground shook. The sound of thunder rolled across the skies. Outside, streaks of fire descended from orbit, metal pods falling like meteors. The Imperial defenders ran to their stations, expecting an enemy bombardment, but the pods didn't explode. They slammed into the ground, then opened. From within, humans poured out. They moved like chaos wrapped in armor, laughing, shouting, some even singing through the comms. Sergeant Holt was first out. His helmet was off, wind whipping through his hair. He had a cigar between his teeth and a grin on his face. "Morning, sunshine," he shouted, even though the sky was full of fire. "Helldivers, spread out. Remember? Don't die unless it's funny." His team answered with cheers. The Imperials watched in disbelief from the fortress walls. The humans didn't take cover, didn't advance in formation. They charged straight at the Drax lines, screaming, firing, throwing explosives as if they were tossing candy. "By the stars," Trell whispered. "They're insane." Karen's jaw dropped. "No," she said softly. "They're human." The Drax army, massive and relentless, surged forward. The ground itself shook beneath their march. The humans met them head-on. The first human grenade exploded with a blue flash, liquid fire bursting outward. A dozen Drax were vaporized instantly, but instead of retreating, the humans pushed harder. They used jump packs to leap into enemy ranks, stabbing, firing, laughing the whole time. One human, small, wiry, and wearing bright red armor, charged into a Drax tank, planted something beneath it, and shouted, "Boom test number 4!" before diving away. The explosion was so massive it flipped the tank over and took half the enemy line with it. On the fortress walls, the Imperials could only watch. Their sensors couldn't track the humans. Every reading was chaos. The battlefield looked like a storm made of fire and madness. "They're breaking the Drax lines," Trell said in disbelief. "With only a few dozen soldiers." Karen's voice was quiet. "They're not fighting like soldiers. They're fighting like demons." In the middle of the battlefield, Holt crouched behind a burning wreck. His comms crackled. "Sergeant! We've got hundreds incoming from the east." "Good," Holt said, grinning. "Tell the boys to start the party trick." He pulled a detonator from his belt and pressed it. Nothing happened for 3 seconds. Then the ground erupted. Dozens of mines hidden beneath the sand exploded in perfect rhythm, like a drumbeat of destruction. The Drax front line shattered. Holt laughed as flaming debris rained down around him. "See, that's how you make an entrance," a voice replied through the comms. Corporal Vega, his second in command. "You're insane, Holt." "Damn right," Holt said, "but it's working." From orbit, Admiral Karen watched the battle feed in silence. The Drax army, millions strong, was retreating. The humans weren't just winning. They were enjoying it. But then something strange happened. A massive shadow rose on the horizon. The Drax war beast, a towering creature of metal and flesh, stomped into view. It was the size of a building, its roar shaking the clouds. Karen gasped. "They can't fight that!" But Holt had already seen it. He smirked. "Oh, finally. Something fun." He grabbed a launcher from his back, twice his size, and aimed it straight at the monster. "Hey, ugly! Smile for the camera!" He fired. The rocket struck the war beast's chest and detonated into a blazing inferno. The creature staggered, bellowed, and fell with a ground-shaking crash. The Helldivers roared in triumph. By the time the sun set, the battlefield was quiet. Smoke rose in columns. The Drax horde had fled. Karen landed on the surface hours later, stepping through ash and wreckage. She found Holt standing on a ruined tank, helmet under his arm, cigar in his mouth. He saluted lazily. "Told you we'd end it." She stared at the field around them. Thousands of Drax bodies, twisted metal and craters as far as the eye could see. "How many did you lose?" she asked quietly. Holt looked down for a moment. 3. 3, he nodded. They died laughing. Karen didn't know what to say. Holt turned to her, his grin fading slightly. You see, Admiral, war's not about glory. It's about insanity. The side that embraces the madness longest wins. He looked at the sky, where the human ship waited. You called for soldiers, but soldiers die obeying orders. You got lunatics who don't care about orders. They care about winning. Karen's voice was almost a whisper. You terrify me, Holt smiled faintly. Good. That means you understand. That night, the Empire celebrated. The impossible had happened. Cordus IV was saved. But in the silence that followed, Admiral Karen couldn't sleep. The Drax horde was broken, yes. But she couldn't shake the feeling that they had just unleashed something far worse. Earth hadn't sent soldiers, they'd sent lunatics. And now, the galaxy would never be the same. And now, the galaxy would never be the same. The victory on Cordus IV spread through the Galactic Empire like wildfire. For the first time in decades, an Imperial world had survived a Drax assault, but not everyone celebrated. The reports that came with the victory were unsettling. Thousands of Drax dead, 3 humans lost, and a battlefield that looked less like a war zone and more like an apocalypse. In the vast Imperial War Council chamber, the admirals and generals gathered around the projection of Cordus IV. The planet's surface was scarred beyond recognition. Admiral Karen Voss stood silently while her peers argued. They are uncontrollable, barked General Threx. The humans ignored every command. They detonated nuclear weapons within their own drop zone. And yet, Karen said quietly, they won. Threx glared at her. At what cost, Admiral? They destroyed half the planet. They laugh while they kill. Karen looked at the hologram of Sergeant Holt displayed above the table. His grin seemed alive even in the static image. They are not soldiers, she admitted. They are something else. On the human carrier Hellmouth, chaos was normal. It wasn't a ship. It was a madhouse floating in space. The corridors echoed with laughter, metal music, and the sound of drills. Some helldivers sparred bare-handed. Others ran experiments involving explosions and questionable science. Sergeant Holt walked through it all, grinning like a proud father among maniacs. A young recruit approached him, a nervous Imperial liaison officer assigned to monitor the humans. His name was Lieutenant Ral. Sergeant Holt, Ral began carefully. Admiral Voss sends her gratitude, but she also requests that your methods be moderated for future operations. Holt looked at him like a teacher watching a child try to explain algebra to a bear. Moderated? He said. You mean less explosions? Yes, Ral said hopefully. Holt grinned. No promises. The next battle came sooner than expected. The Drax horde had regrouped, moving toward Sector 9, an industrial system holding 6 populated worlds. The Empire prepared its fleets, positioning tens of thousands of ships. The plan was simple: defend and hold. But when the humans arrived, they didn't want to hold anything. We don't defend, Holt said during the briefing. We attack, constantly. General Threx slammed his fist on the table. That's suicide. Maybe, Holt said cheerfully. But that's why we're good at it. Hours later, the Helldivers deployed again, this time not to defend a world, but to drop behind enemy lines. The Drax had no idea what hit them. Their command ships began exploding from the inside. Their supply lines burned. Their communications failed. Imperial intelligence couldn't even track where the humans were attacking from. They seemed to appear everywhere at once, as if chaos itself had chosen sides. One Helldiver squad hijacked a Drax battleship, renamed it Friendly Fire, and began using it to bombard other enemy ships while broadcasting heavy metal music across the comms. Another squad rigged an asteroid with engines and turned it into a kamikaze missile. When asked how they planned to steer it, they replied, "We'll figure it out on the way." They did. The asteroid wiped out 3 enemy fleets. From the Imperial flagship, Karen Voss watched the reports in disbelief. "They're dismantling an army of millions," she whispered. With a few hundred lunatics, her communications officer turned to her. "Admiral, their tactics make no sense. No coordination. No formation. They're breaking every rule of warfare. Karen smiled faintly. That's why the Drax can't stop them. You can't predict madness. Meanwhile, deep in enemy space, Holt and his team took cover in the ruins of a destroyed Drax fortress. Smoke and fire filled the air. Status? He asked. Ammo's low, Vega replied. Supplies gone. We're surrounded. Holt grinned. Perfect. Time for Plan B, Vega frowned. Plan B? Yeah, Holt said. Make it up as we go. He picked up a captured Drax cannon, turned it backward, and fired. The explosion collapsed the ridge behind them, crushing the Drax reinforcements. Vega stared. That was your plan? Holt shrugged. Worked, didn't it? Back on the Imperial flagship, the other admirals demanded answers. These humans are dangerous, Threx roared. They disobey orders, destroy property, and treat war like a game. Karen nodded slowly. Yes? Then why keep them? She looked at him, her silver eyes calm. Because they're winning the war, we couldn't. The Empire began to change. The human presence affected everyone. Imperial soldiers started adopting their methods, unpredictable assaults, daring maneuvers, reckless courage. The Drax couldn't adapt fast enough. Their rigid, hive-minded strategy failed against the chaos spreading through the galaxy. But Karen noticed something else, too. The humans weren't just winning. They were enjoying it. Every battle made them stronger, sharper, and a little more terrifying. Weeks later, Holt met Karen aboard the Imperial Command Station. You've done the impossible, she said. You turned the tide of a galactic war, Holt nodded. That's what you hired us for. Karen studied him carefully. And when the war ends? Holt grinned. We'll find another one. Her scales rippled uneasily. You mean, you want this? The fighting? He took a deep breath. Admiral, peace is a dream for people who've never seen war. For us, it's the silence before the next scream. He turned and walked away, whistling. Later, Karen stood alone, watching the human fleet drift through the stars. They had saved her empire, but she couldn't help but wonder, had they also infected it? Because even now, among her own soldiers, she heard laughter in battle, saw smiles in the face of death, and felt something spreading, something cold and wild. Humanity. The war began to turn. World after world once lost to the Drax horde was reclaimed. The Imperial banners rose again, and every broadcast carried the same two words. Human victory. To the people of the Empire, the humans were saviors. To the generals, they were miracles, but to those who fought beside them, they were nightmares. Admiral Karen Voss stood in the observation chamber of the Imperial flagship Valor's Reach, staring at a transmission replay. The footage showed the aftermath of a human assault on the Drax world Targon Prime. The planet wasn't just conquered, it was erased. Cities gone, oceans boiled, atmosphere burning. Her claws dug into the console. They said the target was strategic, not total. The officer beside her, Lieutenant Trell, shifted uneasily. The Helldiver said it was tactical improvisation. They call it a scorched vacuum maneuver. Improvisation? Karen whispered. They turned a planet into glass. Trell hesitated. Admiral, they say no Drax will ever return to that system. Fear alone keeps them away. Karen's tail flicked. Fear, she muttered. That's their weapon, not guns, not ships, terror. Far from the Imperial fleets, aboard the human carrier Hellmouth, the Helldivers celebrated their victory. Loud music, fire, drinking contests. One soldier juggled live grenades for fun. Another tried to tattoo a Drax skull onto the hull plating. Sergeant Holt sat at the center, boots on the table, laughing. His squad surrounded him, grinning, scarred, wild. Corporal Vega slammed a mug onto the table. To the Drax! The group shouted in unison, to the idiots who thought they could scare us! They roared with laughter. Holt looked around, smiling proudly. See, this is what I love about my people. We don't fight for medals. We fight because we can. Because war's the only thing honest left in the universe. Vega smirked. And because we're damn good at it. Holt raised his glass. That too. But not everyone in the Empire saw them as heroes. In the Council of Command, arguments erupted. "They're uncontrollable," shouted General Threx, his scaled fists slamming the table. "They destroy everything they touch." Another officer, a scholar named Mira Sen, spoke softly. "And yet, without them, we would all be slaves of the Drax." Threx's eyes burned. "At what cost? Look at the footage. They laugh while burning cities. They enjoy the screams." Mira turned to Karen, who had remained silent. "You fought beside them. Tell us, are they mad?" Karen looked at them, her face unreadable. "Yes," she said quietly. "But their madness works." The council erupted again. Voices clashed, accusations flew, and the word control echoed through the hall. Karen spoke again, cutting through the noise. "You can't control them. You can only point them in a direction and hope they like where it leads." Meanwhile, deep in space, the humans planned their next assault, their next target, Hegra 9, a fortress world crawling with Drax. Holt stood before his team, briefing in hand. The screen behind him showed thousands of Drax fortifications. "Command wants us to breach the outer defenses," Holt said. "Set up a landing zone for the main fleet," Vega frowned. "So they can roll in after we've done the hard part?" Holt grinned. "Pretty much. What's the plan?" someone asked. "Plan?" Holt said. "Same as always. We drop, we break everything, and if we die loud enough to make them regret it." The squad cheered. Hours later, Hegra 9 burned. From orbit, Karen watched the feed with growing disbelief. The humans hadn't waited for orders. They'd already launched. Drop pods fell like fireballs. The Drax defense grid lit up, but the humans didn't slow. They used the explosions as cover, diving straight into the inferno. Once on the ground, the madness began again. They used captured Drax cannons against their own. They hijacked enemy tanks, loaded them with fuel cells, and drove them into the heart of the fortress before detonating them. They fought hand-to-hand, laughing, bleeding, shouting war songs over open comms. "Who taught them to fight like this?" Trell asked in awe. Karen stared silently. "No one." "That's the point. When the smoke cleared, that's the point. When the smoke cleared, Hegra 9 was silent. The Drax were gone. But so was the fortress. So was the atmosphere. So was half the planet. Karen arrived hours later. The landscape was black glass. Not a single life form remained. She found Holt sitting on the remains of a cannon, polishing his rifle. His armor was burned, his face bloody, but he was smiling. "You destroyed the entire planet," Karen said flatly. Holt looked up. "Yep, no Drax left. Mission accomplished." She stared at him. "That world had civilians, non-combatants, scientists." Holt's smile faded a little. "War doesn't have civilians, Admiral. Not when the other side eats planets." Her voice trembled. "You could have saved them." He looked at her quietly for a moment, then said, "You hired us to win. You didn't say how." That night, Karen sat alone in her quarters. The stars outside the viewport seemed smaller now, colder. In the darkness, she whispered to herself. "We unleashed monsters to fight monsters," but even as she said it, she knew something worse. They weren't monsters, they were human, and that made them far more dangerous. Elsewhere, deep within the Imperial communications grid, a quiet message spread among the Drax ranks. "Beware the Terrans. They do not fear death. They enjoy it." Even the Drax, who had devoured 1,000 worlds, began to retreat from systems marked by human presence. The Empire celebrated again. The Drax were losing faster than ever. But Karen didn't celebrate. She watched the humans laughing on their ship and wondered, when the Drax are gone, who will they fight next? The fall of the Drax horde began quietly. No great battle. No single turning point. Just a slow, creeping realization spreading across the stars. The Drax were running. For the first time in history, the conquerors of galaxies were retreating, and everyone knew why. Because humanity had arrived. Everywhere the Drax went, they found madness waiting for them. On Targon Prime, human raiders still haunted the burned cities, hunting the stragglers for sport. On Vassar, a single Helldiver squad destroyed an entire orbital fleet by ramming their dropship into its reactor core. On Drax Home Beta, the humans broadcast messages in open space. "We're coming. Run faster." The Dracs learned fear, a concept they'd never understood before. Their hives whispered a new word across the void. It wasn't human. It was Helldiver, and it meant death. On the Imperial flagship Valor's Reach, Admiral Karen Voss stood before the Emperor himself. "The Horde's numbers are collapsing," she reported. "They're abandoning entire sectors. The humans call it Operation Sweep." The Emperor leaned forward. "And the cost?" Karen hesitated. "Entire planets reduced to ash. Civilian casualties. High!" The Emperor's eyes darkened. "But the war will end?" She nodded. "Yes, soon. Then let it burn." Karen bowed, but inside her stomach turned. The Empire was learning to think like the humans now. Victory at any price, and maybe that was the most dangerous change of all. Meanwhile, on the carrier Hellmouth, the Helldivers were celebrating again. The hangar echoed with laughter, explosions, and music. They painted kill marks on their armor, told stories of impossible battles, and competed over who had destroyed more Drax ships. Sergeant Holt stood in the center, watching his people. Corporal Vega approached him, helmet tucked under one arm. "You see this, boss? Drax are running scared. We did it." "We're legends," Holt smiled faintly. "Legends are just monsters with good PR." Vega frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Means people forget what it costs to win." He looked out the viewport, where another Drax world burned in the distance. "And one day, they'll remember." The Drax weren't finished yet, though. Desperation made them dangerous. They gathered what was left of their forces and launched a counterattack against the Imperial stronghold at Vora's Belt, a ring of asteroid fortresses guarding the heart of the Empire. Hundreds of Imperial ships faced thousands of Drax war cruisers. The humans were outnumbered 20-1. Perfect odds. Inside the Hellmouth, Holt addressed his troops. "All right, psychos, here's the deal. The Drax are throwing everything they've got at us. I say we throw it right back, and make it explode twice as hard." Someone in the back shouted, "Hell yeah!" "Exactly," Holt said, grinning. "You know the drill. If it moves, shoot it. If it doesn't move, blow it up anyway." The hangar shook with laughter and cheers. Karen, listening through the comms, shook her head. "They sound more like criminals than soldiers." Her aide, Trell, replied quietly, "Criminals don't win wars, Admiral. They end them." The Battle of Vora's Belt was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The humans didn't fight in formations. They scattered like chaos itself. Their ships ignored orders, broke ranks, and flew straight into the Drax lines. Instead of retreating from enemy fire, they charged through it. When ammunition ran out, they rammed their ships into the enemy. Every explosion was a laugh. Every death, a story. Holt's voice roared through open comms across the system. "You wanted war? This is war! Welcome to humanity." The Drax broke. Their fleets turned. Their commanders fled. For the first time, the unstoppable horde became prey. On the flagship, Karen watched the destruction unfold, 1 billion tons of metal tearing through the void. Her comms officer whispered, "Admiral, the humans did it. The Drax fleet is disintegrating." Karen said nothing. She couldn't look away. The battlefield glowed with the light of dying stars, and through it all, she heard the humans laughing. When the smoke cleared, Holt stood on the command deck of a captured Drax warship. His armor was cracked. His face streaked with ash, but he was still smiling. Vega approached him. "Boss, it's over." "The Drax are finished." Holt nodded slowly. "Yeah." "You don't look happy." He looked out the viewport, watching debris drift through space. "Because wars don't end. They just change names." Back in the Imperial capital, the Emperor addressed his people. "Today we celebrate victory. The Drax horde is destroyed, and we owe our survival to humanity." The crowds roared. Fireworks filled the sky. The humans stood on the balcony, waving, smiling, alive. But Karen didn't join the celebration. She stood in the shadows, watching Holt. There was something in his eyes. Not pride, not joy. Just hunger. Later, she found him alone, sitting beside the war memorial. "You've saved the galaxy," she said softly. He looked at her and smiled, but it was a tired smile. "Saved it?" "No, we just reminded it what monsters look like." She frowned. You think that's what you are? I know it. He stood and looked up at the stars. The Dracs were killers by nature. We're killers by choice. That makes us worse. Karen didn't answer. She didn't have to. Because in that moment, she understood something terrible. The Empire hadn't hired humanity to fight a war. It had invited war itself to live among them. Across the stars, the Dracs retreated into the dark, broken, scattered, gone. But whispers followed in their wake. The Dracs feared extinction. The humans embraced it, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The war was over. The Dracs were gone. And the galaxy was quiet for the first time in half a century. The Imperial banners hung proudly over liberated worlds. And every broadcast across the stars spoke the same message: victory, peace, unity. But behind those shining words, something darker was stirring, because while the Dracs' horde had been destroyed, their conquerors, the humans, were still here. And peace was something they didn't seem to understand. Admiral Karen Voss walked through the grand plaza of the imperial capital. Monuments of marble and gold stretched high into the sky, freshly built to celebrate the end of the war. In the center stood a new statue, a human soldier, holding a rifle in one hand and a burning world in the other. Karen stopped to look at it. The face was modeled after Sergeant Holt, though the sculptor had softened his features to look noble. "Do you think they'd like it?" asked a voice behind her. She turned. Holt stood there in a clean uniform for once, his usual grin replaced by something quieter. Karen studied the statue again. "I think they made you look too peaceful," he chuckled. "Yeah. Guess they don't want the kids seeing what we really looked like." She crossed her arms. "You could go home now. Earth must be waiting for you." Holt's smile faded. "Home?" He shook his head. "Home's gone. Or worse, unchanged. There's nothing for people like us there." Karen frowned. "Then what will you do?" Holt looked up at the sky. "Same thing we always do. Wait for the next war." Across the Empire, human behavior began to spread. Imperial troops started painting their armor. Officers adopted human slang. Training academies taught helldiver tactics, unpredictable maneuvers, reckless assaults, improvisation over discipline. At first, it worked. Efficiency went up. Morale improved. The Empire became faster, deadlier, but something else came with it. Attitude. Fights broke out in training halls. Junior soldiers mocked their commanders. Courage turned into arrogance. Discipline turned into chaos. The humans called it spirit. The Empire called it contagion. In a secret council meeting, Imperial officials debated furiously. "They're infecting our people," hissed General Threx. "Our soldiers have become undisciplined. Reckless." Scholar Mira Sen shook her head. "They've made us stronger. The Dracs are gone because of them." Threx slammed his fist on the table. "The Dracs are gone, but what about us? You think those lunatics will stop fighting just because there's no enemy left?" Karen listened silently as the council argued. Finally, she spoke. "They don't know peace," she said. "For them, it's not survival, it's identity. Take away war, and they'll create one." The room fell silent. Threx leaned forward. The room fell silent. Threx leaned forward. "Then maybe it's time we sent them home." Karen looked at him. "And if they refuse?" He smiled grimly. "Then we make them." Meanwhile, aboard the Hellmouth, the Helldivers grew restless. They drank. They fought each other for fun. They built makeshift arenas in the hangars and challenged Imperial troops to brawls. War had been their purpose, and now that it was gone, boredom became the enemy. Corporal Vega slammed a mug onto the mess hall table. "No missions, no enemies, no fun." "Feels wrong, boss." Holt sat nearby, silent, staring at the flickering hollow map. "You ever notice," he muttered, "how peace makes people softer?" Vega laughed. "You mean smarter?" Holt looked up. "No, softer." He leaned back. "Give it a few months. The Empire will start fighting itself again. They always do." Karen visited the Helldivers soon after. The hangar reeked of oil, sweat, and burned metal. Human graffiti covered every wall. Skulls, slogans, strange symbols. She found Holt sitting alone, cleaning his weapon even though he had no reason to. "I hear your people are getting Restless, she said. He didn't look up. That's one word for it. Admiral Threx wants you gone, he smirked. Of course he does. We scare him. Karen stepped closer. He's not wrong to be afraid. Your people are dangerous, Holt, even without war. He finally looked up at her. You think we don't know that? She met his gaze. Then prove him wrong. Leave peacefully. Holt's eyes were cold. And if peace doesn't want us? Karen hesitated. Then you make it want you, he laughed softly. Admiral, you talk like you think peace is a choice. For us, it's just the silence between gunfire. A month later, the unthinkable happened. A rebellion broke out on Nexar Prime, a key Imperial world. It wasn't the Drax. It wasn't any known faction. It was Imperial soldiers, fighting their own commanders, using human tactics, shouting human war cries. They called themselves the Free Legion, and their symbol was a burning skull. When Karen saw the emblem, she felt her stomach twist. It was the Helldiver's mark. The Empire called for order. The humans called it entertainment. Holt and his team were deployed to help suppress the rebellion. But as the Hellmouth descended toward Nexar Prime, Holt said quietly to Vega, "Funny thing, isn't it? The Empire trained its soldiers to fight like us, and now they can't stop them." Vega grinned. "What do we do?" Holt stood. "What we always do." He loaded his rifle. "We improvise." Back on the Imperial flagship, Karen watched the dropships vanish into the clouds of Nexar Prime. For the first time in her career, she didn't feel pride or fear or even hope. She just felt the cold certainty of truth. They hadn't ended the war. They had simply changed who it was against. The rebellion on Nexar Prime was supposed to be small. A few angry soldiers, a few riots, nothing the Empire couldn't handle, but within days it spread like fire through dry grass. Every outpost, every garrison, every training center infected by human methods, improvisation, disobedience, and defiance. The same madness that had saved the Empire now turned against it. And once again, everyone looked to the humans for salvation. Admiral Karen Voss stood on the bridge of the Valor's Reach, watching the chaos unfold on her monitors. Cities burned, fleets mutinied. Entire sectors were in revolt. Lieutenant Trell rushed to her side. "Admiral, the Free Legion has taken the Nexar defense grid. They're broadcasting across the entire Empire." Karen's eyes narrowed. "Put it on." The screen flickered. Static. Then, a human face appeared. Sergeant Holt. His armor was scorched, his grin familiar, but his eyes were colder than ever. "This is Sergeant Holt of the Helldivers," he said. "If you're hearing this, congratulations. You've learned what we tried to teach you." Karen's heart froze. "You wanted to fight like humans. You wanted to win like humans. Well, here you go. This is what victory looks like." The transmission cut to images of fire, rebellion, and soldiers laughing in the middle of chaos. The Empire built a machine to control the galaxy. We just gave it a soul, and now it's screaming. The feed ended. Karen whispered, "What have you done, Holt?" Hours later, Karen received direct orders from the Emperor himself. "Admiral Voss, terminate the Helldivers. All of them. Earth's forces are to be removed from Imperial space immediately." She closed her eyes. She'd known this day would come. On the planet below, Hellmouth burned in the atmosphere, fighting off wave after wave of Imperial interceptors. Inside, the Helldivers prepared for what they already knew was coming. Corporal Vega slammed a new energy cell into his weapon. "They're turning on us, boss. Empire wants us dead," Holt nodded calmly. "Of course they do. It's the natural order of things. You call in monsters to fight your enemies. Then you try to kill the monsters when you're done." Vega spat on the floor. "So what do we do?" Holt grinned. "What we always do. Laugh louder." The hangar shook as another blast hit. Sparks rained from the ceiling. "Helldivers!" Holt shouted. "The Empire thinks it can erase us. Let's remind them what human extinction looks like." The soldiers roared. The battle for Nexar Prime was chaos incarnate. The sky glowed with plasma and debris. Imperial fleets clashed with human gunships. Free Legion rebels fought side by side with deserters, mercenaries, and madmen. Karen's command fleet watched in horror as the Helldivers' ship dove straight into the Imperial blockade. "Admiral," Trell shouted, "they're not retreating, they're attacking us." Karen's voice was steady. "Hold your fire." "But," I said, "hold." She watched the Hellmouth tear through an entire cruiser line, explosions rippling in its wake. The humans fought like ghosts, like legends refusing to die. "They don't want to win," she murmured. "They just want to matter." Inside the wrecked corridors of the Imperial flagship Talon's Eye, Holt and his squad fought their way to the command deck. "Sergeant!" Vega shouted over the gunfire. "We can't win this!" "Win?" Holt laughed. "Vega, we already did. They reached the control core." Sparks and alarms filled the room. Holt grabbed the comm mic. "This is Sergeant Holt, last Helldiver standing. The Empire says we're too dangerous to live." "They're right. But before we go, we're leaving a gift." He turned to his team. "Light it up," Vega grinned. With pleasure, they overloaded the flagship's reactors. The chain reaction spread like wildfire through the orbital grid. One by one, the Imperial fleet's weapons shut down. The entire system went dark. On the Valor's reach, Karen stared at the dead comms, her voice shaking. They took down the entire defense grid." Trell swallowed. "Admiral, what now?" Karen whispered, "Now." They die laughing. And in orbit above Nexar Prime, the Hellmouth exploded. The blast could be seen from the surface, a sphere of blue fire blooming across the sky. For a moment, it looked like a new sun being born. Then it faded, leaving behind only silence. But before the Hellmouth was gone, one final transmission spread across every Imperial frequency, Holt's voice. "You called for help." We answered. "You wanted victory." "We gave it to you. But remember this, Earth doesn't send soldiers. We send reminders, and you'll never forget us." Then static. Days later, the war ended for good. The Free Legion scattered. The Empire slowly regained control. But nothing felt the same. Every Imperial soldier still heard that laughter in their dreams. Every commander saw those grinning faces in the smoke, and every world whispered the same warning. Never call Earth again. Admiral Karen Voss stood at the Memorial Field overlooking Nexar Prime, a monument of scorched metal marked the site where the Hellmouth had fallen. She laid a single data crystal at its base. The last recorded footage of Holt's message, maybe. "You were right," she said softly. "Maybe peace isn't for you." She looked up at the stars. "But the galaxy will remember." For a long moment she stood there in silence. Then she heard it. Faint, distant, carried on the wind. Laughter. And somewhere, in the endless dark between the stars, a signal pulsed. A human signal, faint but unmistakable. Helldivers never die, but unmistakable. Helldivers never die,